Hello there, welcome to It's a Shaw Thing. I'm your host Rob Shaw, here to talk a little NFL football. Now there's a couple of big questions now that one big question has been answered. That is, who's the best team of 2008 or 2009? And the answer to that question were the Pittsburgh Steelers. Congratulations to them. But after that exciting Super Bowl, there still are some questions. Let's go down the list. We start with Arizona, number one. Is Kurt Warner coming back? I'll tell you what. He looked like an MVP out there this past week, and he was simply fantastic. Had the Cardinals have won that game, he clearly would have been the MVP. Check out the numbers. 377 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and yes, it was costly. And he also did have that fumble, though that was a little more questionable. Surprised they didn't review that play. Kurt Warner simply is still in a little bit of a prime. The guy's simply been fantastic. In fact, when you look at the numbers for his career, he's a guy who averages 260 passing yards per game. This year, 286 passing yards. So he is still in his prime, putting up great numbers, 30 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. So he still does have something left in the tank. Hopefully he will come back, because he will definitely be helping out a lot of fantasy teams this year. And by the way, he won't be picked late in the draft like he was last year, when there were still some questions whether Leinart would in fact start at the quarterback position. Now, another question for the Cardinals to answer. Will Anquan Boldin come back? This is a guy who's simply unhappy because he's not getting paid the money that he deserves. He definitely puts his neck out there, or his head out there on the line every single week. We saw him take a tough blow in the end zone, came back a couple of weeks later after major surgery to his face. The guy's a tough guy, there's no question about it. Look at the numbers during the Super Bowl, pretty impressive. 8 receptions, 84 receiving yards. If he does return, he will continue to provide great balance for Larry Fitzgerald and certainly put up great numbers. He would remain a top 5 probably wide receiver. 2 Cardinals in the top 5. He is that good. Look at his numbers this year, then consider the games that he did miss. He is a little injury prone because, again, he plays a very tough style of play, but I'll tell you, he will put up some big numbers. Now, in the event that he does leave, well, suddenly Steve Breston looks like a great guy to target in the middle rounds when it comes to fantasy football drafts. You look at his numbers even during this big Super Bowl. 6 receptions, 71 receiving yards. Not bad for a guy who put up over 1,000 receiving yards this year. He came out of the University of Michigan, was kind of slow to his start in the NFL, but suddenly he has picked it up. This is a guy to certainly pay attention to next year, particularly if Boldin does leave. Next question up. Edgerrin James, is he going to come back to the Arizona Cardinals? He was clearly unhappy throughout the season because they didn't give him the ball that much. In fact, at one point of the year, Tim Hightower was starting over him. Hightower, the big rookie, who, by the way, had 1 carry during the Super Bowl for 0 yards. As far as James go, not great, but 9 carries for 33 yards. He did have some great performances throughout the playoffs this year. Not sure how good James is going to be. I look at him kind of like maybe a Jamal Lewis. He's certainly had his better days in the past, and he's not exactly huge, going to put up any huge numbers for any big team. But I'll tell you, if a team does pick him up and consider playing him half the time in one of those split backfields, he's a guy I'd consider in maybe the middle to late rounds. And now we're up to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, congratulations on their championship. The one big question I have for them, not many questions. This is a young team. Look at their quarterback, their wide receivers, a very good, talented defense. I'm not too worried about them, but the one question I do have is Santonio Holmes. Unbelievable performance. Obviously, we all saw him get the big trophy. 9 receptions, 131 yards, one of the most impressive touchdowns we've ever seen, whether it be in a Super Bowl, playoffs, or whatever. It was an unbelievable catch. But the question is, could he have his head straight for an entire football season? Is this a guy who we should rank in the elite? The potential is clearly there. Look, a couple years ago, huge numbers, despite missing almost a handful of games. This year, he missed a couple of games, some to injury, some to suspension. He had some drug use midway through the season. He's got an incredible amount of talent. We saw that in Ohio State. We've seen that in the NFL. We've seen that on the biggest stage. But will he be consistent throughout an NFL season? Well, if he is, it will be his first. I think that he is a good guy to invest in. He's young. He's got plenty of talent. And now, obviously, everyone knows about him. They're going to try to get him the ball a little bit more because he's proven to be that feature receiver. But he's a guy who has to prove he can withstand the hits and also keep his head straight. And finally, the last question when it comes to the Steelers, who will be their running back next year? Willie Parker, there's no question about it, very talented, had some huge games, particularly in the postseason. The Super Bowl wasn't huge for him. He had 19 carries, 53 yards. But he is injury prone. That's something we have to pay attention to. I know a lot of fantasy managers get very frustrated with this guy. He's usually up there leading the league in rushing, in rushes, and also as well as rushing yards. And then he gets injured and he kills your fantasy team. So I'm not sure you want to trust this guy next year. I'd probably draft him maybe in the 4th, 5th round. Pay attention to what happens during the preseason. Rashard Mendenhall is going to come back. He obviously got injured in his rookie year. Muelde Moore proved a lot, though he definitely is more of a reserve guy, but it is a big question mark whether or not it will end up being Willie Parker, will it be Rashard Mendenhall. What's going to happen with the grounds game for the Pittsburgh Steelers? My friends, that's all for now. It was an exciting football season, no question about it, but don't get too excited. Now it's time to start looking for next year. Until we meet again, if you have any fantasy football questions, email us fantasy@opensports.com.
Think you can complete the drive? Play today and get an automatic entry to win daily prizes, 2 tickets to the big game, and a brand new car. Start your drive today at opensports.com.